Good afternoon, Muskie fans. You're here on your Razorcast. That's Reaker and Zink talking about Muskie basketball. Hey, Jim, how you doing today?
Doing great. Nice, bright, sunny day out. A little cold, though. Good thing basketball's an indoor sport.
That's right. You can go to the hardwood. Well, it was a pretty quiet week for Xavier Basketball, as we said on our Razorcast last week. Not much coming up. Just the Utah game. We got a couple games to talk about coming up this week. But it is that time of year with finals and exams and holidays coming up where there's not much going on, and they pretty much know what they want. But let's go back and take a look at the Utah game. We had, you were very optimistic, and I tried to point out some concerns from their back-to-back losses to Baylor and Colorado. It looks like they solved some of those issues against the Utes.
Made progress anyway. Most important thing, I think, is they got that bad taste of losing out of their mouth. You know, as well as I, coaching and playing through the years, that when you have a loss, the first thing you want to do is get back out there and take that and get a win and get it out of your mind. And especially, I think it would have been really telling on the players with exam week and not playing all week if they'd have lost to Utah in 3 in a row. It would not have mentally been good for the Muskies. So I think it was a good mental win for them. Yeah, a couple things that have been concerns that you have brought up and we've discussed before were the turnovers and the free throw shooting. And they really made a lot of progress, I think, in both cases, in the fact that I believe they only had 8 turnovers for the entire game. You know, if you could keep it under double digits, you could probably keep yourself in about every game. The other thing you always harp on is the free throw shooting, and you bring that up as maybe a weakness, which they only shot, I believe, 70% for the game. But a key factor was down the stretch. You know, the Utes were within about 10 points the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game and started fouling. And down the stretch, the Musketeers were 10 for 10 from the free throw line. That's when you want to see them hit them, when the pressure's on and the team's trying to get back in the game by getting you to miss some free throws so they get some extra possessions. So I was very, very happy with those 2 factors. And again, the win was almost like they were almost business-like. That they knew they could win. They knew they were better. They just needed to execute, and they did that.
Well, they did, and it was nice to see, Makura break out from him. He had a bit of a shooting slump there. He got 18 points. He was 6 for 11 against the Utes with a 5 from 7 from three-point line. We'll definitely be able to use that because you can't always count on just 1 or 2 people who's coming through. And, of course, Gaston came through. He's beginning to move more and more into the rotation, 5 of 8, and they also had 14 boards. So a nice presence there underneath. And as you always talk about, that great Xavier defense kept Kyle Kuzma to his season low of 11 points. He was the star for the Utes, and he's shut down pretty much by the Muskies.
Yeah, Rasheed Gaston, I think we're starting to see the Rasheed Gaston that we thought we would see early on. You know, being a transfer from Norfolk State, he actually practiced the entire year with the Musketeers last year. And I heard all these glowing reports because he was going against Jalen Reynolds and James Farr every day. And people were saying, you're going to love this guy because he competes with them every day and sometimes beats them on a daily basis in practice. So everybody was, thinking this was going to be the Rasheed Gaston that we were going to see. But I think, he stepped his game up as far as playing level. Norfolk State, more of a mid-major, and now he's in, what we call the big time. And I think he's finally reached that level. And, he had his second double-double game in a row. And if we could get that out of him, I think. And his defense was very good, too. Again, he held Kuzma to only 11 points, and he was responsible for a lot of that defense.
That's good, and great on the offensive boards. It's a big help as well.
I believe Utah was maybe one of the top rebounding teams in the country coming into this game, and the Musketeers, it has been one of their strengths all year, and they did out-rebound them. I think it was pretty close. I think it was 33-28, but still, for one of the top teams in the country, that was a good performance by the Muskies, showing that they could compete.
Well, they did. I mean, the Utes only had 9 total offensive boards, and Gaston had 8 for the Muskies, so that'll show you where we're able to pound. I think the only thing that we still have to resolve here is something we talked about before, which is some of these guys are just playing a lot of minutes, especially Blewett. Against Utah, 38 minutes. Sumner's putting in over 30 minutes a game. Bakura, 35 against the Utes too. So we got to find where are those people that are going to come off the bench. Gates and Gooden both had double-digit minutes, but like 14. I think Coach Mack's still working on it, but we got to find that rotation where we can get some of these guys the rest. Not necessarily for this week, but as we get later in the season, when you might be worn down a little bit.
Yeah, I think a couple things there. Number one, in Gates' case, I think, they're just transitioning him back into shape, into game shape. And so I think you'll see his numbers start to pick up. And, here's an expectation they've had for Gates. I've heard Coach Mack say this all last year. I've heard him say it this year. Never really seen it come to fruition, but they say that Kaiser Gates is the best shooter on the team. They say at practice he can hit 20, 30 three-pointers in a row, and we've never really seen that in a game. So I think maybe he'll come to where when he starts getting more minutes and he gets into the game and in the flow and back in shape, hopefully that, because, he's 6'8", so he's one of those that can play inside and play outside, hard to, defend. You put a small guy on him and he's going to take you to the basket. You put a big guy on him, he's going to step out and shoot. So I think that's the issue with him. With Gooden, I was a little surprised he didn't play that much, although I will say my observation in the last couple weeks is the speed of high-profile college basketball has still got him a little bit. I think he's getting there. I think he's going to be a good one. He's a great ball handler. He's a scorer. He averaged, I think, about 25 points in high school. So I think he's going to come along. Yeah, I thought we would maybe see him, but I saw out in Colorado and Baylor where he played like a freshman. He got himself in some traps a couple times, made some bad passes, put his teammates in some bad situations where he passed them the ball. So I think his time will start to increase too, but I think, coach is like, well, you're not really playing up to standard today, so I think that's why his minutes were limited. But I think through the year we're going to see, if Edmond happens to leave for the NBA at the end of this year, I think Quentin was brought in to be the point guard from next year on, the starting point guard.
Well, you bring up a couple things that will transition us right into something we talked about last week, speed of the game and, shooting and handling the ball. Last week we talked about what might happen with Miles Davis, and I think you've gathered a little more information over the past week that you can share with our fans.
Well, it's still a little bit. I'm really impressed with the way Xavier and Chris Mack has handled this whole situation, in that it hasn't really turned into a media frenzy. The young man, young adult, I guess you could say, because I believe he's about 23 years old now. He made some mistakes, and the university and the basketball program are making him pay for that with this suspension. But they also, nobody even knows where he is. He's not been seen on campus, and Coach Mack has not given that information out. Now, maybe after this is all said and done down the road, especially if his comeback is successful, maybe we'll find out what was going on. But I really don't think it's any of our business. I'm sure he's taking care of business wherever he is. Here's the key, I think, and I've heard several other people say, I think logistically what it is, the semester ends tomorrow, which I believe, because I don't think he's enrolled. He's not enrolled where he's going to class on campus, although we know in this technological day you can be enrolled, and he could be at home in New Jersey taking classes at Xavier. We don't know what's going on if he is really enrolled, but I believe that after this semester ends, then he will technically be eligible again. I don't want to go. I'm not going to make one of my bold predictions and say that we will see him sitting on the bench Saturday, but I'm going to say there's going to be a Miles sighting in the next week because Coach Mack has said that his return is going to probably be closer to conference time, and the first Muskies Big East game is December 28th.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. Well, just moving forward, Miles, more from the basketball standpoint, we don't want to harp on the other personal issues. Like you say, he's dealt with that, and we know he would be a nice bonus for the Muskies. So let's go ahead and look ahead to this week. Let's skip over Saturday's game because I know you got a few special things for that. Let's talk about Tuesday's game first. We got the Eastern Washington Eagles coming to town for a 6:30 game. Now they're making a little tri-state visit. They're going to visit the NKU Norse on Sunday, and imagine they're staying in town to play Xavier on Tuesday. 8-2 out of the Big Sky Conference. Their two losses are tough teams, Northwestern and Texas. No real quality wins. And this is a team that, but they were 17-15 last year. Already have 8 wins, but they were 26-8 the year before. So not sure what we're getting there. They did just get by a Morehead State team that's in a bit of a turmoil in overtime just this past week. So what can we expect when we play the Eagles on Tuesday?
Well, two things I noticed just looking at their resume so far this year is they've already played in 4 overtime games. So they've played a lot of minutes. But to their credit, they've won all 4 of those. The other thing I noticed is they score a lot of points. They're usually in the high 80s, 90s. They even had one game where they scored in triple digits, and I don't even think that was an overtime game. So, yeah, I don't know that much about them, but it seems to be that they're going to bring in a high-powered offense. Again, my only concern with the game against Eastern Washington is the timing. It's 5 days before Christmas. I'm sure, Xavier, a lot of their players have a little distance to travel to go home, and I know most of them usually try to make it home for at least Christmas Day. So that's going to be the last game right before Christmas. All the students are off campus. I'm sure that Tuesday night the Cintas Center is going to seem a little dead because there won't be a lot of students there. There's a lot of things going on Christmas. There might be some avid Muskie fans that don't even make it there. So that's my only concern, that they don't bring their A game. But I don't think Chris Mack will allow that to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to. I mean, you're sounding like it might be a trap game for some of those things, but Eastern Washington just sort of a wrap up before they head into the Big East Conference. That leads us to talking about Saturday, which I know is a game near and dear to your heart. We've got Wake Forest and what we call the Skip Prosser Classic, or the Skip Prosser Tournament, and they're coming in. Wake Forest is 8-2. They lost to Northwestern as well as to Villanova. So give us a little preview of what to expect 8 p.m. at the Cintas Center on Saturday.
Well, this is another quality opponent. Again, we go back to that Xavier's reached a point in their development where they're playing teams out of the Big 5 power football conferences, and the ACC, I think that's your conference on our other show this year, but I believe they're probably the number 1 ranked conference in the country this year coming into the year. Now, most of the previews that I looked at, they were picked well into the bottom half of the ACC, but we got to remember, again, it's the ACC. We're talking Duke, North Carolina, and a lot of other big-name programs. So, again, I think the Musketeers will be okay if they play their game. But, again, they're going to have to come and play well and be consistent. Again, and they have Danny Manning of fame of Danny and the Miracles back in 1988 as their head coach. And this was a game last year that the Musketeers were on that long winning streak to open the season. I think this was the 10th or 11th game last year. And they went down there to play it, and they were down by, I believe, close to 18 or 20 points in the first half. They did manage to come back and win it. But, they got some talent, although they didn't have a lot coming back. Actually, their leading scorer is somebody that could give the Xavier Musketeers a lot of problems in it. He's a 6'9" power forward, and that's John Collins, who's a sophomore, who got a little bit of time as a freshman, but now he's actually averaging a double-double right now. Again, they haven't played quite the schedule that the Musketeers have played, but he's going to have to be someone that, we're going to look for Gaston to try to shut down again and be able to rebound against.
Yeah. Well, they are coming in, and they've finished the last 2 years 12th and 13th place in the ACC, but like I say, it is the ACC. The only team that finished behind them last year was Boston College, who didn't win a game in the ACC. of course, known more for their football program in years past. And they are young. As I looked at it, of the 15 players they have listed on their rosters, 7 are freshmen or sophomores, led by Collins, and there's only 2 seniors and only 1 gets significant playing time. So this might be the Danny Manning, who's just in his 3rd year, trying to build the program. He won quickly at Tulsa. We'll have to see. But also, more important than that, is just what it means to Xavier fans to play Wake Forest every year in memory of Skip Prosser. So I know you prepared a few things about Skip and his time at the 2 schools, so we'll let you take it away.
Well, Skip Prosser is probably by far, not to downgrade any of the other Xavier coaches, is by far my favorite Xavier coach since I've been a Xavier fan since the mid-1980s. And I think part of that is anything you read about Skip, a lot of times, it'll talk about that he was, number 1, he was a teacher. Number 2, he was a coach. And you read all the stories about all the lessons he taught through basketball, and he believed that the gymnasium was a great classroom of life, he would call it, where he could teach a lot of lessons that, his players could carry into their lives after their basketball careers were over. And he actually, it's kind of interesting, if you look back at his history, he actually started out as a freshman basketball and football coach. He was at a place, headed down here, Lindsay Military Institute. And this was after he had graduated from the United States Merchant Marine Academy, where he always used to joke he majored in driving ships. And actually, I don't think he didn't even have an education degree, but he was so into history and literature that he eventually did get his education degree when he went on to Wheeling Central Catholic to coach as the head coach there for 6 years, and actually led them to a state championship. But here's an interesting tie. We were just talking about Miles Davis a little bit and how the Musketeers have handled this situation. Tough situation he was put into. I don't know if all the fans remember, but in 1985, it was his first year as the head coach of Xavier, and he had gotten them into the NCAA tournament. Actually, it was the last year that they were in the MCC, the Mid-Collegiate Conference, before they went to the A-10. They actually went undefeated in the MCC that year, but fans may remember they got upset by Wright State in the very first game of the MCC tournament. They still gained a bid to the tournament and got a number 11 seed and went against Georgetown in the first game. Georgetown then had a player you may remember, named Allen Iverson. But actually the Musketeers had upset them a few years previously in the NCAA, and it looked like they might have a good chance to do it, just the style they played. A lot of people were picking that as kind of their upset of the year as, people started doing their brackets. But a couple of his key players got into trouble the week before the tournament. They actually got into a fight in a bar. One of them was a starter, and the other one was the 6th player off the bench. But because of that, he suspended them. He did not allow them to play in that game, and the Musketeers ended up only losing to the Georgetown Hoyas by 5 points. And a lot of people believe if those 2 players would have played, it might have been a different game, because the Musketeers actually did lead for much of the game, but because they really only had 8 scholarship players, because the 2 were suspended, they kind of ran out of gas. But I think that tells a key story about who Skip Prosser was, because he, it's his first year. There's a lot of pressure on him, and I'm sure he wanted to be successful after following Coach Gillen, but he put his ethics and ahead of winning. And Jeff, you and I have been in that situation before coaching. It always comes up in every situation. How do you deal with discipline, and how is it going to affect the team, and what's fair and what isn't fair? So, I just thought that was an interesting situation, given how, again, we've talked about Miles Davis and his situation, how Xavier's handled that the last few years.
And the reason we bring it up is not only because they're playing as Skip did coach at Xavier for 7 years and Wake for 6, and those of you who may not be familiar, because it has been 9.5 years. Skip, unfortunately, dropped dead after jogging while he's at Wake Forest at the tender age of 56, which is something Jim and I can relate to, because we're right in that range, and they thought he'd be there for a long time. But a couple of points you made, I looked up something too, and they went into it. Supposedly his favorite quote was from Ralph Waldo Emerson that said, "Our chief want in life is someone who will make us do what we can." And that ties right into his legacy as a teacher. And when you look at it, that comes through in that every senior that he coached earned their degree in 4 years. But he also sent kids to the NBA. This is a guy that coached Aaron Williams, James Posey, David West, who was a player of the year at Xavier, as well as people like Josh Howard and Chris Paul. So he knew how to do both sides of the sword. He's sorely missed. I mean, he's certainly still be coaching somewhere today had he not passed away at the tender age of 56. So thoughts to the Prosser family, and we're glad that both Xavier and Wake are keeping his memory alive. So down on campus, he was known as Two Pint Prosser. You'd go to the local estabulary and have two pints of Guinness and call it a night and go home.
Yeah, and a quote I've found many, many times in reading this recently, and it really, I'll tell a story that kind of relates to this, is one of the things he liked to say all the time was never delay gratitude. And I told Jeff this story, I think last week, a little bit. I share with the fans that early on when Skip was coaching, me and a buddy used to go to his radio show a few times, and I was shocked the very first time. There's probably 20, 25 people, and it was usually held in a local establishment. And it was Joe and Byron would be talking to him, and he would take questions from people who were sitting there in the crowd. They'd also have call-in questions because they would be doing the show live on the radio. But the very first time I was so amazed because as he finished the show, he got up and he started going. He went to a table or two and was talking to the people sitting there, and I just figured it was somebody he knew, he was close to. But as I kept watching him, and eventually he went to every table in that establishment and talked to every person who came there. And when he came to our table, what he was doing was he was thanking everyone for being there. And that again just shows how humble he was. Here you are, a Division I, pretty high-profile coach, but you're going out, he realizes that he wouldn't have that job. He wouldn't be paid the money he's getting paid if it wasn't for the fans who pay to come see his team play. So that was just something that really stuck with me. He was just a very down-to-earth person. And again, the other thing was he had a lot of what they called Skipisms. He had a lot of sayings, and a lot of them were quotes, as you just quoted, quotes because he was an avid reader, was into literature and read all the time. In fact, here's another thing I came across. A lot of Division I teams, I think they're allowed every 3 or 4 years to take a trip in the summer. A lot of them go to Europe, and they play some semi-professional teams over there, and they tour. But when Skip would do it at both Xavier and Wake Forest, he would require that all of his players take a class on the history of where they would be visiting while they were over there. And not only did he require his players to do it, he would also take the class himself, and in fact, he would do all the assignments because most of the classes at the very end you had to write a final paper, and he always wrote his final paper and turned it in just like the players did. So again, he was a true teacher, and again, that's why I think he's my favorite coach. He was great for Xavier where they were. He was the coach who had to take them from the MCC to the A-10, and in fact, his first year in the A-10, the Musketeers struggled a little bit. I think it might be their last losing season ever, and but he got them up to, within the next 2 or 3 years, they were winning the A-10, either the regular season or the tournament almost annually, and they stepped it up, and he was the perfect person for that job. Favorite story I came across, though, is when he first went to Wake Forest at his press conference. And again, he was very good at humor, a lot of times making jokes about himself. But supposedly at his press conference down at Wake Forest, he said to the press, he says, I don't know much about coaching in the ACC, but I can tell you I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night. Which little play off the commercial that we are all familiar with. So, but yeah, in fact, just this morning I found a couple great stories. In fact, I didn't have time to stop reading them. I'm going to go back and read them, but just some great stories. You know, you can't find a person who knew him or met him that didn't like him. And again, he was just a total class coach. One other thing for the fans, I'll leave you with this, and then we'll wrap this up, is if you are going to the game on Saturday, I don't know if you know this, and this is great, the giveaway on Saturday for the first 3,000 fans is a Skip Prosser beer stein. So if you want one of those, get there early. In fact, we usually don't get there until about 10, 15 minutes before tip-off. But my buddy texted me the other day. He says, we're going early on Saturday, right? And I said, yeah. He says, how early do you think we need to go? And I said, well, the doors open at 6:30. He says, we'll be there at 6:30. So, yeah, if you want a beer stein, make sure you show up a little bit early because I'm sure they're going to go fast. And there's probably a lot of other Xavier fans just like me that are planning to arrive a little bit earlier. So you get that free giveaway.
All right. That's great stuff on Skip, and that's why there is a Man of the Year award for coaching in the NCAA. It's named the Skip Prosser Award, which is presented annually to those who achieve success on the basketball court, but who also display moral integrity off of it as well. It's currently held by Zach Spiker from his time at Army. He's now at Drexel. And, of course, Chris Mack was a winner in 2011. Well, it's time to wrap it up here, so we'll go on. Do you have any trivia or tidbits you want to run past me here?
That's a silly question, isn't it? Yes, I have trivia. And in my true form, it's going to relate to something we've talked about today, and, of course, that would be Skip Prosser. So I got a little Skip trivia for you. We'll see. You probably came across this in your research as you were preparing for today's show, but we'll see. You know, we're talking about the Skip Prosser Classic on Saturday between the two schools he coached at, Xavier and Wake Forest. But, he had one other head coaching position in his career for 1 year. It was actually between his time as an assistant at Xavier and head coaching, he left for 1 year to take over another Division I program. Do you know the name of that school, Jeff?
I remember when he left. Everybody thought that he would be back, that they wanted him to get head coaching experience. He moved on to Maryland and went to a small school there, Loyola of Maryland. The Greyhounds, I believe.
You are correct. You are correct. And here's something I won't even challenge you with this, but I came across. He was the first coach in NCAA history who took a school. He took them to the NCAA tournament that 1 year he was there. Actually, it was the first year they'd ever been in the NCAA tournament. They did it by winning the conference tournament that year for the Loyola College out of Maryland. But he was the first rookie coach to bring the first NCAA tournament bid to a Division I school. And I believe that still remains true today. I think he's the only one who's ever done that, to bring a school their first bid in his rookie year. So just a little tidbit on Skip Prosser. Yeah, he was successful everywhere he went. And, of course, we haven't talked about it much. He was very successful down at Wake Forest, not only in bringing a winning program to the school, but also bringing a lot of spirit and a lot of sellouts. He brought a lot of fun to campus, and he was a favorite of the students down there. So we'll look forward to Saturday. It'll be fun to honor Skip. I'm sure there'll be some tributes to him during the game and halftime and things.
We'll be looking forward to hearing that. Next week, though, we're going to dedicate to our Big East Conference preview. We talked about a little in one of our first shows, but now that everybody's been through the pre-conference slate, we can talk about that. And then also on our broadcast that talks about NCAA men's in general, we'll be talking about some of those previews as well for the conferences that we picked. I don't know if you saw it, but big news last night in men's basketball. Raleigh Massimino got his 800th win. Now, probably a lot of people
see that.
Raleigh's still coaching. He's 82 years young, and he's working at Kaiser University, which is down in the Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale area. 518 of those wins are in the NCAA. The rest of them are down there with Kaiser, which is an NAIA school. But 82 years young. Probably everybody remembers that very exciting 1985 final game against Georgetown. I remember sitting in drinking a February with our friends at halftime. The Georgetown big favorites. Telling my buddy, he says, Georgetown's going to take this because there's no way that Villanova's going to shoot 70% in the second half. And I was right, they didn't. They shot 90% in the second half to take the game against John Thompson and the Hoyas. Which gives me, you may know this too, at 800, they're not all NCAA wins, but there are 7 coaches that have 800 wins or better. 2 of them are active, Coach K and Jim Boeheim. The rest are all retired, Bobby Knight, Dean Smith, Jim Calhoun, Adolph Rupp, and Eddie Sutton. But do you know who's inching up on it? There's 4 that could possibly get to 800. 1 will definitely get it. Just to give you a hint, 3 of them are recent NCAA championship coaches, and one's taken 2 different teams to the Final Four and is a note close to home. You know any of those?
John Calipari.
Calipari, he's got 671. He keeps going or doesn't jump back to the NBA. He should get 800. Yep.
Roy Williams.
Roy Williams will be the next one. 793 wins. He'll probably pass that sometime February, I would imagine, the latest.
You said there was 1 more?
2 more.
2 more.
They're active. One has won in NCAA, one has not, but he's taken 2 different teams to the Final Four. And that
should be a hint.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my brain's not going to come up with it.
Another hint. I don't want to totally befuddle you, like you enjoy doing with me sometimes. You do give me plenty of hints, though. They're both schools used to be really big rivals and are situated on the Ohio River.
Oh, I would say Rick Pitino.
You are correct. 752. And the second coach is no longer on the school. He's moved on, but he used to be a big rival of Louisville, very close to home.
Nope, not
We'll
there.
put you out of your misery then. Bobby Huggins down in West Virginia, who's in for many years. 727, took both UC and West Virginia to the Final Four, though he's the only one of the 4 that has not won a national title. So we'll look for more fun when we come next week for our Razorcast with Xavier and the Big East Conference preview. And on Tuesday, we will have our Trogcast and talk about what to look for in the conferences. Be ready to pick your conference winners, your contenders and pretenders.
All right, I will be.
All right. Everybody have a good weekend. Good luck to the Muskies on Saturday versus Wake Forest, and on Tuesday versus Eastern Washington Eagles. And we'll just say, go Muskies.
Go Muskies.